Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Thunderhawk and watched the stars through the large window. The ship was quiet and peaceful as it moved through space. Jake had been a captain for 5 years now, and he loved every moment of it. His crew was the best in the fleet, and they worked together like a family. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at her station monitoring all the communication signals from across the galaxy. Commander Ryan Blake checked the weapon systems and made sure everything was ready. Lieutenant Sam Torres worked in the engineering section, keeping the engines running perfectly. They had been flying together for 3 years, and Jake trusted every single one of them with his life. The Thunderhawk was one of Earth's newest warships, and it represented everything humans had learned about building powerful vessels. The ship had thick armor plating that could withstand massive damage. The weapons were strong enough to destroy other ships with just a few hits. The engines could push the ship faster than almost anything else in space. But what made the Thunderhawk truly special was its crew. Humans came from Earth, which everyone in the galaxy called a death world. The gravity was stronger than most planets. The weather was more violent. The animals were more dangerous. Growing up on Earth made humans tougher and stronger than most other species in the galaxy. Jake had joined the Space Force when he was 18 years old. He had dreamed of flying among the stars since he was a small child. His father had been a pilot, and his grandfather had been a soldier. Service ran in his family like blood in his veins. When Earth joined the Galactic Coalition 3 months ago, everyone had been excited. Humans would finally take their place among the stars alongside hundreds of other intelligent species. But Jake had noticed something troubling in those 3 months. Most of the other species in the coalition had no real military forces. They relied on diplomacy and treaties to keep the peace. They believed that talking could solve any problem. Jake hoped they were right, but his training told him otherwise. The alarm on Amy's console suddenly started beeping. She looked at her screen, and her face changed from calm to worried in just a moment. She pressed several buttons and listened to something through her headphones. Then she turned to Jake with concern in her eyes. "Captain, we are receiving a distress signal from the Valerian system. It is coming in on all emergency channels. They say they are under attack and need immediate help." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the data on her screen. The Valerians were one of the founding members of the Coalition. They were peaceful traders who had built their entire civilization around commerce and friendship. They had no weapons and no soldiers. They believed that everyone in the galaxy could live together in harmony. "Who is attacking them?" Jake asked. "The signal says it is the Krathon Dominion. They have destroyed the Valerian defense satellites, and they are bombing the cities on the surface. Millions of people are dying down there, Captain." Ryan pulled up information about the Krathons on his screen. The Krathons are raiders and slavers. They have been attacking small colonies on the edge of Coalition space for years. Intelligence says they usually run away before any Coalition ships can respond. But this time they are hitting a major world. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. The Krathons were predators who hunted the weak. They took slaves and destroyed anyone who resisted. The Coalition had talked about doing something about them for years, but nothing ever happened. There were always more meetings and more discussions, but never any action. "How far away are we from the Valerian system?" Jake asked. Amy checked her navigation computer. "If we push the engines to maximum speed, we can be there in 18 hours, sir." "What about other Coalition ships? Is anyone closer?" Amy shook her head. "The nearest Coalition fleet is 3 days away, Captain. We are the only ones who can reach them in time." Jake looked around at his crew. They were all watching him and waiting for his decision. They knew what he was thinking. The smart choice would be to wait for backup. One ship against an unknown number of enemies was dangerous. They could all die if they went charging in without support. But Jake also knew that if they waited 3 days, there would be nothing left to save. The Valerians would all be dead or enslaved. Their beautiful cities would be nothing but ruins. Set a course for the Valerian system. Maximum speed. All crew members report to battle stations. Ryan stood up from his chair. "Sir, we should contact Earth Command first. We need authorization for combat operations. Send them a message and tell them what we are doing. But we are not waiting for permission. Those people need help right now." The crew moved quickly to carry out his orders. Amy sent messages to all sections of the ship telling everyone to prepare for battle. Sam pushed the engines to their maximum output, and the Thunderhawk leaped forward through space. Ryan began running diagnostics on all the weapons to make sure they would work perfectly when the time came. Jake sat down in his command chair and pulled up all the information they had about the Krathons. Their ships were built for raiding, not for fighting real battles. They had good shields but weak armor. Their weapons were powerful, but they took a long time to recharge between shots. Most importantly, the Krathons relied on fear and surprise. They hit targets that could not fight back and then ran away before anyone could stop them. But they had never fought humans before. They had never faced a species that grew up on a death world. They had never met people who understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. The hours passed slowly as the Thunderhawk raced through space. More messages came from the Valerian system. Each one was more desperate than the last. The Krathons were destroying everything. They were taking prisoners and loading them onto slave ships. They were burning cities just to spread terror. The Valerian government begged for anyone to help them. Jake recorded a message and sent it back to them. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Thunderhawk. We are coming. Hold on just a little longer. Help is on the way." He did not know if they received his message. He did not know if any Valerians were still alive to hear it. But he had made a promise and he would keep it. The Thunderhawk and its crew were going to war. The Thunderhawk dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valerian system. Immediately, every alarm on the bridge started screaming. Amy's fingers moved quickly across her controls as she counted the enemy ships. "Captain, I count 14 Krathon vessels. 12 are destroyers and 2 are heavy cruisers. They are in orbit around the main planet, and they are still bombing the surface." Jake studied the tactical display in front of him. The Krathon ships were spread out and not maintaining any defensive formation. They were acting like predators who believed no one would challenge them. That arrogance was going to cost them everything. "They have detected us, sir. We are being hailed. Put it on the main screen." The view screen flickered and showed a Krathon commander. The alien looked like a giant lizard with scales that shined like oil. Its eyes were cold and cruel. When it spoke, the computer translated its hissing voice into English. "A single human ship. How amusing. You are new to the coalition, yes? Perhaps you do not understand what is happening here. Leave now and we will let you go. Stay and you will die with these pathetic Valerians." Jake kept his face calm and his voice steady. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Thunderhawk. You are attacking members of the Galactic Coalition. Stop your attack immediately and surrender your ships or we will open fire." The Krathon commander laughed. It was a horrible sound like glass breaking. "You demand that we surrender? 1 ship against 14? The coalition has grown weak if this is the help they send. Very well, human. We will destroy you first and then finish with the planet." The transmission ended. Ryan's tactical board lit up with warnings. 6 destroyers are breaking orbit and heading directly for us, Captain. Shields to maximum power. Charge all weapon systems. Amy, open a channel to the planet's surface. Channel open, sir. Valerian Command, this is the Thunderhawk. We are engaging the enemy fleet. Get everyone into shelters and stay there. We are going to end this. A weak voice responded from the planet. Captain, you cannot fight them alone. There are too many. You will be killed. You asked for help and Earth has answered. Morrison out. Jake watched the 6 destroyers approaching in a loose formation. They were not taking him seriously. They thought 1 ship would be easy to destroy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Target the lead destroyer. Fire when ready. The Thunderhawk's railguns opened fire. These weapons shot solid metal slugs at incredible speed. Most ships in the galaxy used energy weapons like lasers and plasma beams. Those weapons were effective, but they could be blocked by shields designed to stop them. Railguns were different. They fired physical projectiles that hit with massive force. The Krathon shields had never been designed to stop kinetic weapons. The first destroyer's shields collapsed immediately. The metal slugs tore through its hull like paper cutting through cloth. Explosions rippled across the ship as systems failed and fuel tanks ignited. Within seconds, the destroyer was nothing but debris floating in space. The other 5 destroyers scattered in panic. Their commanders finally realized they were not hunting prey. They were facing a predator. They opened fire with their energy weapons. Red beams lashed out at the Thunderhawk. The human ship's shields absorbed the hits. The energy readings spiked but held steady. Launch missiles. Target the 2 closest destroyers. A swarm of missiles streaked away from the Thunderhawk. Each one was guided by advanced computers that could track and follow enemy ships. The Krathon destroyers tried to evade, but they were too slow. 2 more destroyers exploded as the missiles found their targets. The 3 remaining destroyers tried to surround the Thunderhawk. It was a good tactic against most enemies. But humans had been fighting in 3 dimensions for centuries. Jake had trained for exactly this kind of battle. Execute combat pattern Delta 7. The Thunderhawk's engines roared to life. The ship twisted and spun in a maneuver that would have torn apart most vessels. The sudden acceleration pressed everyone on the bridge hard into their seats. But every human on board had trained for high-gravity situations. Their bodies had evolved on a world where the gravity was stronger than normal. They could handle forces that would kill most other species. The ship spun and brought all its weapons to bear on the nearest destroyer. Railguns and missiles struck together in a devastating combination. The destroyer's shields failed. Its hull was breached in dozens of places. Atmosphere vented into space as the ship went dark and began drifting. The final two destroyers turned and tried to run back toward the heavy cruisers. But the Thunderhawk was faster. Its engines could produce accelerations that other species would consider impossible. Do not let them reach the main fleet. Destroy them. The chase was brief. Both destroyers were reduced to wreckage within minutes. Jake looked at the tactical display. 6 enemy ships destroyed in less than 10 minutes. But the real battle was just beginning. The 8 remaining Krathon ships were forming up into a proper defensive formation. The 2 heavy cruisers moved to the center with the 6 destroyers arranged around them in a protective screen. They had stopped underestimating the humans. All enemy ships are powering weapons, Captain. They are preparing to fire everything they have at us. Jake knew that the Thunderhawk could not survive a concentrated attack from 8 ships. The shields would fail and the hull would be destroyed. He needed to break up their formation before they could coordinate their fire. Sam, I need everything you can give me. Push the engines past their safety limits if you have to. Sam's voice came through the intercom from engineering. Already done, Captain. We are running at 110%. The engines are hot, but they will hold. Good. Ryan, plot me a course straight through the center of their formation. Ryan looked up from his console in surprise. Sir, that will take us right between the 2 heavy cruisers. They will have point-blank shots at us. Exactly. They are expecting us to try and pick them off from long range. We are going to do the opposite. Set the course. Ryan's fingers moved across his controls. Course plotted and ready, sir. Then let us show these raiders what humans can do. All ahead, full. The Thunderhawk accelerated toward the Krathon formation like an arrow fired from a bow. The enemy ships opened fire with everything they had. The space between the fleets filled with energy beams and missiles. The Thunderhawk's shields flared white-hot as they absorbed hit after hit. Shields down to 60% and falling. Transfer all power from rear shields to the front. We are not running away. The heavy cruisers fired their main weapons. Massive energy beams designed to destroy capital ships lashed out at the Thunderhawk. The shields held but barely. Alarms blared across the bridge as systems began to overload. But Jake kept the ship on course. Straight into the teeth of the enemy formation. At the last possible moment he gave the order. All weapons fire now. The Thunderhawk unleashed every weapon it had. Railguns fired in a continuous stream. Missiles launched in waves. Energy weapons added their power to the devastating barrage. All of it focused on the lead heavy cruiser at point-blank range. The cruiser's shields collapsed instantly. The railgun slugs punched through its armor. The missiles followed and detonated deep inside the ship. Secondary explosions rippled through the vessel as ammunition and fuel ignited. The great ship broke apart in a massive fireball that lit up space like a newborn star. The explosion from the heavy cruiser sent shockwaves through space. Debris and fire spread outward in all directions. The nearby Krathon ships were caught in the blast wave. Their shields flickered as they tried to absorb the energy. Jake did not give them time to recover. Hard turn to port. Target the second heavy cruiser. The Thunderhawk pivoted sharply. The maneuver was so violent that the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. Everyone on the bridge felt the force pressing against them. But they held their positions and continued working. The second heavy cruiser was trying to bring its weapons around to fire. But the Thunderhawk was already inside its firing arc. At this close range, the human ship's weapons were devastating. Railgun fire tore into the cruiser's side. Missiles exploded against its hull in rapid succession. But this Krathon captain was smarter than the others. Even as his ship took damage, he ordered the 6 remaining destroyers to converge on the Thunderhawk. They closed in from all sides, creating a deadly crossfire. Energy beams struck the human ship from multiple angles. The shields began to fail. Shields down to 30%, Captain. We cannot take much more damage. Jake looked at the tactical display. The 6 destroyers were surrounding them. The heavy cruiser was wounded but still fighting. If the battle continued like this, the Thunderhawk would be destroyed. He needed to do something unexpected. Something that would change the entire situation. Ryan, I need you to target 3 of those destroyers with nuclear missiles. Set them for proximity detonation. Detonate them as close as possible. Ryan's hands stopped moving. Sir, nuclear weapons at this range will create an electromagnetic pulse. It will knock out our systems too, I know. But we can restart faster than they can. Sam, prepare to reboot all systems on my command. Make it as fast as possible. Understanding crossed the faces of his crew. It was a desperate plan. It was dangerous. But it might be their only chance to survive. Targets locked. Missiles launching now. 3 nuclear missiles streaked away from the Thunderhawk. They moved faster than the Krathon ships could track. The destroyers tried to shoot them down, but the missiles were too quick and too close. They detonated in a triple flash of nuclear fire. The explosions themselves damaged the nearby destroyers. But the real devastation came from the electromagnetic pulse that radiated outward. Every electronic system in the area was hit by the wave of energy. The 3 targeted destroyers went completely dark. Their shields failed. Their weapons stopped working. Their engines shut down. They became nothing more than dead metal floating in space. The other 3 destroyers and the heavy cruiser were also affected. Their shields flickered and died. Their computers crashed and began rebooting. For a brief moment, everything was chaos. The Thunderhawk systems also crashed. The bridge went dark. All the screens turned black. The hum of the engines disappeared. For 3 seconds, they drifted in the darkness with no power and no control. Then the emergency systems kicked in. Red lights illuminated the bridge. The main computers began their restart sequence. Within 10 seconds, the engines were back online. Within 15 seconds, the weapons were ready to fire. The Krathon ships were still struggling to restart their systems. They had not been designed to recover quickly from an electromagnetic pulse. Their computers were older and slower. They needed more time. Time that Jake was not going to give them. All weapons target anything that is still moving. Fire at will. The Thunderhawk's railguns opened fire again. Without shields, the Krathon ships had no defense against the kinetic weapons. The first destroyer was torn apart in seconds. The second followed moments later. The third tried to activate its engines to escape, but a missile strike destroyed its engineering section. The 3 destroyers that had been hit directly by the nuclear pulse were still floating dead in space. Jake opened a communication channel to them. Krathon vessels, you are defeated. Power down completely and surrender. If you try to restart your systems, we will fire. You have 30 seconds to comply. There was a long silence. Then a voice came through filled with fear. We surrender, human. Please do not kill us. Jake turned his attention to the heavy cruiser. It had managed to restart some of its systems. Its engines were coming back online. The captain was trying to run. Target that cruiser. Do not let it escape. The Thunderhawk pursued the damaged vessel. Even wounded and desperate, the heavy cruiser was fast. But it was not fast enough. Missiles caught up to it and slammed into its engines. The cruiser's reactor went critical. The explosion was massive and bright. When the light faded, there was nothing left but glowing debris. Jake looked at the tactical display. The battle was over. 14 Krathon ships had entered the system. 11 were destroyed. 3 had surrendered. The Thunderhawk had won against impossible odds. Amy sent a message to the Valerian government. Tell them the enemy fleet is destroyed and they are safe now. Then contact Earth Command. Request a garrison force and an investigation team. I want to know why the Krathons attacked this system. The crew began to relax. The tension of combat slowly faded. They had survived. They had won. But the cost had been high. The Thunderhawk had taken serious damage. The shields were barely functional. Several hull sections had been breached. 2 crew members had been injured when a console exploded. Sam's voice came through from engineering. Captain, we need to dock somewhere soon. The ship needs major repairs. We cannot fight another battle in this condition. Understood. Amy asked the Valerians if we can use one of their orbital shipyards. While Amy made the request, Jake walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the planet below. Valaria Prime was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents, but now parts of it were burning. Cities had been destroyed. Millions of people were dead. The scars of the Krathon attack would take years to heal. The view screen activated and showed a Valerian female. She had pale blue skin and large expressive eyes. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. Captain Morrison, I am Prime Minister Sella. You saved my world. You saved my people. We thought we were going to die. We begged for help and you came. One ship against so many. How can we ever thank you? Jake felt uncomfortable with her gratitude. He had only done what needed to be done. What anyone should have done. Prime Minister, we did what any ally should do. You asked for help and we answered. That is what the coalition is supposed to mean. Other coalition ships were closer than you, Captain. They chose to wait for orders and reinforcements. You chose to come immediately. That choice saved millions of lives. Jake did not know what to say to that. He had made his decision based on what felt right. He had not thought about politics or protocols. He had just known that people needed help. We will need to use your facilities to repair our ship, Prime Minister, and we would appreciate any medical assistance you can provide for our wounded crew members. Anything you need, Captain. Anything at all. Valeria owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. Over the next few hours, the Thunderhawk moved into orbit and docked with a Valerian repair station. Medical teams came aboard to help the injured. Engineering crews began assessing the damage to the ship. The 3 captured Krathon vessels were secured, and their crews were taken into custody. Jake finally left the bridge and went to his quarters. He was exhausted. The battle had lasted less than an hour, but it felt like days. He sat down at his desk and began writing his report for Earth Command. He had to explain why he had engaged 14 enemy ships without waiting for backup. He had to justify his actions and defend his decisions, but as he wrote, he felt no regret. The Valerians were alive because he had acted. That was all that mattered. 3 days after the battle, Jake stood in an interrogation room, looking through a transparent wall at one of the Krathon prisoners. The alien sat chained to a chair. Its reptilian face showed no emotion and no remorse. It simply stared back at Jake with cold, calculating eyes. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant stood beside him, reviewing data on her tablet. She was the ship's intelligence officer, and she had spent the last 3 days questioning the prisoners. What she had learned was deeply troubling. "What have you discovered?" Jake asked. Lisa's face was grim as she answered. "The attack on Valeria was not random, Captain. It was a test. The Krathons have been planning a massive invasion of Coalition space for over a year. They wanted to see how quickly the Coalition could respond to an attack on a major world. They wanted to identify which species had real military capabilities and which did not." Jake felt cold anger settling into his bones. "How many worlds are they planning to attack?" "At least 12, Captain. All of them are peaceful species with no standing military forces. The Krathons intend to hit them all simultaneously. They will enslave the populations and strip the planets of resources. By the time the Coalition organizes a response, the Krathons will be gone. When are they planning to launch this invasion? 3 months from now. But that timeline might change now that we destroyed their test fleet. They know the Coalition is aware of their plans." Jake turned away from the window and walked to the center of the room. His mind was racing through possibilities and strategies. How many ships do the Krathons have? Intelligence estimates at least 200 warships concentrated at their home system. They have been building up their fleet for years while the Coalition did nothing. 200 ships. The Coalition had no unified military force. Most member species had only a few patrol vessels for protecting their own systems. Earth had the largest fleet with about 40 combat-capable ships. Even if every Coalition species contributed their ships, they would still be badly outnumbered. Earth Command needs to know about this immediately. The Coalition Council needs to be informed. We need to start preparing a defense. Lisa nodded in agreement. "I have already sent the full intelligence report to Earth, sir. But there is something else you should know. The Coalition Council is divided on how to respond to what happened here." "What do you mean divided?" "We saved the Valerians. Some council members are grateful. The Valerians are calling you a hero. Several other species are supporting Earth's actions. But there are others who are frightened by what they saw. One human ship destroyed 14 enemy vessels. That kind of military power scares them. They are worried about what humans might do with that power." Jake sat down heavily in a chair. He had not considered the political implications of the battle. He had only thought about saving lives. But now he understood. The other Coalition species had never seen real warfare. They did not understand that sometimes violence was necessary to stop greater violence. To them, the Thunderhawk's actions looked brutal and terrifying. "What happens now?" he asked. "The Council has called an emergency session. Earth is proposing a joint military operation to strike the Krathon home system before they can launch their invasion. But several species are opposed. They want to try diplomatic negotiations first." Jake stood up and paced across the room. "The Krathons enslave entire populations. They destroy anyone who resists. You cannot negotiate with predators like that. The only language they understand is strength. I agree, Captain. But we are not the ones who need convincing. The Council has to make that decision. A communication alert sounded. Amy's voice came through the speaker. Captain, we are receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Scott wants to speak with you immediately. Jake made his way to the communications room. The screen showed Admiral Kevin Scott sitting at his desk. The older man looked tired, but there was pride in his eyes. Captain Morrison, I have read your report and reviewed the tactical data from the battle. What you accomplished was remarkable. You saved millions of lives and you did it with minimal losses on our side. Earth is proud of you and your crew. Thank you, sir. But we have a larger problem. The Krathons are planning a full-scale invasion. I know. We received the intelligence report. The Joint Chiefs are already developing response plans. But I need you to understand something, Jake. Your actions at Valeria have changed everything. Half the Coalition sees humans as heroes and protectors. The other half sees us as dangerous warriors who are too quick to use violence. We only fought because we had no other choice, sir. I know that. But perception matters in politics. The Council is debating whether to place restrictions on human military vessels. Some species want to limit where we can travel and what weapons we can carry. Jake felt frustration building inside him. They want to restrict us because we protected one of their own members. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if you understand their perspective. Most Coalition species come from peaceful worlds. They have never faced real threats. The idea of warfare terrifies them. What you did was necessary, but it also showed them how dangerous we can be. What are our orders, Admiral? Remain at Valeria for now. We are sending additional ships to reinforce your position and to provide humanitarian aid. In the meantime, I need you to attend the Council session via holographic link. They want to hear directly from you about what happened and why you made the decisions you did. When is the session? Tomorrow at noon station time. Be prepared, Jake. Some of the Council members will try to paint you as a warmonger. Do not let them provoke you. Stay calm and stick to the facts. The transmission ended. Jake sat alone in the communications room thinking about what was coming. He had spent his entire career preparing to fight enemies. He had never expected to have to defend himself to allies. The next day, Jake stood on a holographic platform on the bridge. His image was being transmitted to the Council chamber, located on the Coalition Capital Station. He could see the Council members sitting in a large circular room. Representatives from hundreds of species watched him with a mixture of emotions. Some looked grateful. Others looked suspicious or afraid. The Council speaker called the session to order. Captain Morrison, you have been summoned to explain your actions at Valeria. Please tell us in your own words what happened and why you chose to engage the Krathon fleet without authorization. Jake took a deep breath and began. 3 days ago, we received a distress signal from Valeria. The message said they were under attack and millions were dying. We checked and found that we were the only Coalition ship that could reach them in time to help. I made the decision to respond immediately rather than wait for authorization or reinforcements. A Council member from the Telvari species spoke up. You engaged 14 enemy ships with only one vessel. That was reckless and dangerous. You could have gotten your entire crew killed. That is true. It was dangerous. But the Valerians were dying. Every minute we delayed meant more deaths. I believed that my crew and my ship were capable of stopping the attack. I was right, another Council member spoke. This one was from a species Jake did not recognize. You destroyed 11 ships and killed thousands of Krathon crew members. Such violence is shocking to those of us who believe in peaceful resolution of conflicts. Jake felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. I gave the Krathons a chance to surrender. They refused. They chose to continue their attack on innocent civilians. I did what was necessary to stop them. The debate continued for over an hour. Some Council members defended Jake's actions. Others condemned them. Finally, the Council speaker raised his hand for silence. Captain Morrison, the Council acknowledges that you saved Valeria. We are grateful for your service. However, we must also address the concerns that have been raised about human military capabilities. We will be forming a committee to study the issue and make recommendations. Jake nodded. He understood what was really happening. The Council was afraid of humans, but they needed human protection. They were trying to find a way to control Earth's military while still benefiting from it. As the session ended, Jake felt exhausted. He had won the battle at Valeria, but the political war was just beginning. 2 weeks after the council session, Jake received new orders from Earth Command. He had been promoted to Commodore and given command of a joint coalition task force. 30 Earth warships would form the core of the fleet, along with support vessels from other coalition species. Their mission was simple but dangerous. Strike the Krathon home system and destroy their invasion fleet before it could launch. The fleet assembled at a staging area near the edge of coalition space. Jake stood on the bridge of the Thunderhawk and watched as ship after ship arrived. The Earth vessels were dark and powerful. They had been built for war and they looked the part. The coalition support ships were brighter and more colorful. They carried medical supplies and repair equipment. They would provide assistance, but they would not fight. Commander Rachel Hayes had been assigned as Jake's fleet tactical officer. She was a veteran with 20 years of experience in combat situations. She studied the tactical displays and ran countless simulations preparing for every possible scenario. All ships are reporting ready, Commodore. We have 30 Earth combat vessels and 42 coalition support ships. Intelligence confirms that the Krathon home system contains approximately 200 warships. Jake had reviewed those numbers many times. 200 against 30. The odds were terrible. But the plan did not rely on matching the enemy ship for ship. It relied on superior tactics and coordination. The Krathons had never faced an organized military force. They were raiders and slavers, not trained soldiers. Open a fleet-wide channel. Amy activated the communication system. Jake's voice would now be heard on every ship in the fleet. This is Commodore Morrison. In a few minutes, we will jump to the Krathon home system. We will be facing an enemy that outnumbers us nearly 7-1. They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to hesitate. They are wrong. Today we are going to show the entire galaxy what happens when predators hunt the innocent. Today we teach them that some species will fight back. All ships prepare for jump. The fleet vanished in bursts of light. They crossed the distance between systems in moments. When they emerged at the edge of Krathon space, alarms immediately began sounding. Hostile contacts detected. I count 237 enemy ships. They were waiting for us. Jake had expected this. The Krathons knew that retaliation would come eventually. They had prepared their defenses and gathered their full fleet. But knowing the enemy was coming and being ready for them were two different things. Implement Battle Plan Alpha. All Earth vessels form into 6 wolf packs of 5 ships each. Coalition support vessels maintain position at the rear and be ready to provide assistance. The fleet split into smaller groups. Each wolf pack spread out to attack from a different angle. The Krathon fleet tried to maintain a unified formation, but they were suddenly facing threats from multiple directions. The first wolf pack, led by Captain Nathan Price, struck at the enemy left flank. 5 human warships concentrated their fire on a single section of the Krathon line. The focused assault overwhelmed the shields of 3 heavy cruisers. All 3 exploded within minutes. The second wolf pack, under Captain Laura Kim, went after the Krathon supply vessels at the rear of their formation. Without supplies, the enemy fleet could not sustain a long battle. 4 supply ships were destroyed before the Krathons even realized they were under attack. Jake led the third wolf pack directly toward the largest ship in the enemy fleet. It was a massive dreadnought that served as the Krathon command vessel. If they could destroy it, the entire enemy fleet would lose coordination. The Krathons fought back with desperate fury. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the 2 fleets. Several human ships took heavy damage. The destroyer Hamilton reported critical systems failure and had to fall back. The cruiser Defiant lost shields and suffered hull breaches on 3 decks. But the human ships kept fighting. They moved like predators hunting in packs. They struck weak points and isolated enemy vessels. They used their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. The Thunderhawk and its wolf pack reached the dreadnought. The massive ship opened fire with every weapon it had. The barrage was devastating. The shields on all 5 human ships began to fail. All ships concentrate fire on the dreadnought bridge. Pour everything we have into that one spot. 5 ships fired together. Railguns, missiles, and energy weapons all focused on a single target. The dreadnought's shields held for several seconds. Then they collapsed. The combined firepower punched through the armor and destroyed the bridge in a massive explosion. The effect on the Krathon fleet was immediate. Without their command ship directing them, individual captains began making their own decisions. Some tried to flee. Others pressed forward in disorganized attacks. The lack of coordination made them vulnerable. The human wolf packs exploited the chaos ruthlessly. They identified targets and destroyed them before moving to the next. The battle became a massacre. One by one, the Krathon ships were eliminated. An hour into the fight, the situation was clear. The Krathon fleet had been reduced to less than 80 ships. Human losses were significant, with 5 ships destroyed and 12 heavily damaged. But the tactical advantage was completely on the Coalition side. Jake opened a channel to all remaining Krathon vessels. "This is Commodore Morrison of the Coalition fleet. Your command structure is destroyed. Your fleet is broken. You have one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that tries to escape or fight will be destroyed. You have 2 minutes to decide." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, Krathon ships began shutting down their weapons. By the end, 73 ships had surrendered. The rest had tried to run and been destroyed. Jake felt no joy in the victory. Too many good people had died on both sides, but it had been necessary. The Krathon threat was over. Their invasion would never happen. Over the following weeks, Coalition forces occupied the Krathon worlds. The species leaders were arrested and brought to trial for their crimes. Thousands of slaves were freed and returned to their home worlds. The Krathon military was disbanded and their weapons were destroyed. The galaxy watched as humans demonstrated not just military power but also mercy and justice. They did not seek revenge or conquest. They established order and then handed control to Coalition administrators. 6 months later, Jake stood in the council chamber. He wore his dress uniform with all his medals and commendations. The council speaker addressed the assembled representatives from hundreds of worlds. "For generations, the Coalition has maintained peace through diplomacy. We believed all conflicts could be resolved through talking and compromise. The Krathon threat showed us the flaw in that belief. Evil exists in the galaxy, and sometimes it can only be stopped by those willing to use force." The speaker looked directly at Jake. "Humanity has shown us a different path. You do not seek war, but you do not run from it when justice demands action. On behalf of the entire Coalition, I thank you and your people." Jake stepped forward. "The Coalition asked for help, and Earth answered. We will always answer, but I hope the galaxy learns from what happened. Peace must be defended. The strong have a duty to protect the weak, not exploit them." The chamber erupted in applause. Not everyone approved. There were still those who feared human military power. But the majority understood what Earth had given them: a future where the predators protected the innocent instead of hunting them. Later, Jake stood on an observation deck looking at the stars. Amy joined him carrying 2 cups of coffee. "The Council is forming a joint defense force. They want Earth to train the officers and establish command protocols." Jake took the offered cup. "Someone has to teach them. Better we do it than they learn through more tragedies." Amy nodded. "The crew is ready for whatever comes next." "We trust your leadership," Jake smiled. "Then I guess we are building something new. A real military force that can protect the Coalition from threats." As they watched the stars together, Jake thought about everything that had happened. From a desperate distress call to a galaxy-changing battle. From one ship answering a plea for help to an entire civilization taking responsibility for protecting others. The aliens had begged for help. The Deathworld fleet had brought judgment. Now humanity would teach the galaxy that true strength meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. The future was uncertain, but for the first time the Coalition had a real chance at lasting peace. Not because everyone agreed to be peaceful, but because those who threatened the peace would face consequences. Jake raised his coffee cup in a silent toast to all those who had fallen. They had given their lives so others could live free. That sacrifice would not be forgotten. As long as humans stood watch, the innocent would have protectors. That was the promise Earth made to the galaxy, and it was a promise they would keep.